But at the time, the sport was really, really small. Before George became world champion, the sport was really, really small. I remember his first payday fought Cairo Parisian. It was for 3 to show and 3 to win. So $6,000 total if everything goes right.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Hurt Business Podcast. My name is Firas Zahabi, and today I'm super excited about today's episode to have this conversation. Not because my guest and I have very similar names, but because he is truly one of the greatest minds we have in MMA today. He is Firas Zahabi. How are we doing today, Coach?
Doing great, man. Thank you for having me on, Ferris.
I want to just start with your upbringing. What was it like growing up in Canada?
Canada's cool. It's a beautiful place. We have a lot of culture here, lots of people from different parts of the world. You grew up with all sorts of diversity here. So it was a very interesting place to grow up.
And we both share that our parents are Lebanese immigrants.
Aha,
So we share a
aha.
culture there. What was that like?
That was cool. My parents, they taught me Arabic when I was young. So I speak Arabic as well. And I thought that was a great thing to have as I got older. The older I got, the more I appreciated. The more I traveled the world, the more I realized, how important it is to know multiple languages. I learned French as well, and so I speak 3 languages quite well. So that's, I think, a great advantage.
That sure is. Do your kids speak Arabic as well?
More English and French, and some Arabic, but not as much as I did. Because when I was younger, my parents only spoke Arabic,
Mhm.
but now my parents talk to my kids in English, and the kids are more used to English. Everything is English. So definitely, I hope that when they get older, they start learning Arabic officially, like more seriously. But they definitely have a base. They've heard it growing up. They understand the pronunciation. They have the hard part down. So I really think in the future they can kind of make it up.
For sure. They'll pick it up quick if they have the
Yeah,
fundamentals, the foundation, the rest comes fast. Now I read somewhere that you grew up playing American football.
that's right.
How popular is that in Canada?
It's nowhere near the level in the U.S. Everybody wants to be a football player in the U.S. In Canada, it's more hockey. Hockey's like the big sport. The national sport is lacrosse and hockey. Hockey, obviously, though, by far is the most popular by far. Everybody wants to play hockey. It's a very expensive sport. So a lot of the young immigrants, when we came to this country, I was born in the country. My parents came. They couldn't put us in hockey. It's too expensive. The equipment, the skates, and all that's very, very expensive sports. So we're playing football. Football is just a cheaper option, but I absolutely love football. I fell in love with it. American football, so not like what we call soccer in Europe. They call it football. I'm talking about American football, where you're trying to score touchdowns. I absolutely loved it. I was watching NFL. I grew up watching Montana throw passes to Jerry Rice. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice. That combination, that combo. I absolutely fell in love with the sport. I played pee wee football. I played bantam football. That's like a high school level. It's nothing major, but I had a great, great love for the sport. Like all young kids, I wanted to be a professional uh, athlete, and I was playing quarterback and linebacker. But as people were reaching 6 feet tall, I wasn't tall enough now to play those positions anymore, and I wasn't interested in playing anything else. I wanted to be the quarterback or I wanted to be the linebacker. Those are the 2 positions I played when I was younger. And I told myself, you know what, I'm gonna do something else while I hit my growth spurt. Just waiting around for my growth spurt never came. I saw Hoist Gracie on a commercial. They were promoting UFC 2. Now I had never heard at the time. I'd never heard of UFC 1. I didn't know what happened. They were showing the champion Hoist Gracie, and they were picking up this little guy who weighs 170 pounds, and they were showing all these big guys that he defeated. So I was shocked. I was completely shocked. I couldn't believe it that martial arts is real, because at the time martial arts was a big question mark. Like you saw it on TV. Is it real? Is it fantasy? I wasn't sold on it. I didn't know it. I didn't really have an opinion. I was very young. But when I saw Hoist Gracie being raised as the champion, he was picked up by his brothers, and he was raising his hands in the air, and I couldn't believe that this little guy was beating a sumo wrestler. He beat a 6-foot karate guy. Like, he was just crushing guys in this tournament. And he was actually the smallest guy in the first tournament, and I believe also the smallest guy in the second tournament. I couldn't believe it. I had to see this thing. So I showed it to my brothers. We begged our parents to buy the pay-per-view. We watched UFC 2, a bunch of guys, me and my brothers and some of our friends. We invited people over our house. We watched UFC 2. Now, all of us thought Hoist was going to get killed. The first one, we didn't see it. We saw the highlights. Can't be right. It's got to be not a fluke, but it can't be right. They were showing us everybody in UFC 2, the lineup. You had these massive individuals, muscular, gigantic. Now, look, I love Hoist, but I didn't give him a chance. He was my hero at the time. I saw he won the first one, but he can't beat these guys. Lo and behold, he wins UFC 2. Blows my mind. Now, at this point, I've completely forgot about football. I'm not interested in football anymore. I'm completely obsessed with this individual they call Hoist Gracie. So, of course, I started buying Black Belt magazine. Every interview, every technique that they show, I was just kind of learning from magazines, just like obsessed with wanting to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There was no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu anywhere in Montreal. So, I finally found the purple belt that trains under Renzo Gracie. It's incredible how things work. I went to a local grappling tournament. I saw a guy there who's training under Renzo. And he's like, yeah, I teach class twice a week. I signed up. I started training. I never quit since then. That was over 20 plus years ago.
You were how old whenever you went to this?
I was about 20 years old when I started jiu-jitsu. So I started very late. But the thing is, the sport was very young. There was nobody else doing jiu-jitsu, and I was doing it full time. Like, I was hooked. I was doing it 7 days a week. I would train twice a week because class was only twice a week. And the rest of the days, I would do jiu-jitsu at home. I made a mat out of covers. I had brothers to drill with, had neighbors. They were doing taekwondo. I'd call them to my basement and train. Like, whatever they taught me. I remember the classes were Wednesday and Sunday. I would never miss a class. Whatever I learned Wednesday and Sunday, it was drilled all week. I was obsessed with jiu-jitsu, obsessed. And my trainer at the time was a purple belt under Renzo Gracie. He was traveling to Manhattan. So after that, I started traveling to Manhattan to learn more jiu-jitsu, and I was just completely obsessed with the sport. Till today, I still wrestle every day, till today.
What were your parents' reaction when you told them jiu-jitsu is what I want to do?
I didn't tell them this is what I want to do. They just thought it was something I was, like, it was just my sport. I didn't think it was going to be a career. I had no idea at the time. Only weirdos did jiu-jitsu. You have to remember, this time there was no fame in this at all. Nobody had heard of UFC. People who saw UFC were like, "That's disgusting. That's horrible." Most people were not interested in UFC. It was only young men that were interested in UFC. All the older adults thought it was crazy. I remember showing it to my history teacher in high school. I showed him a video. He was like, "Oh no, this is human cockfighting. It's absurd." I was like, "Well," I was trying to tell him, "No, it's a technique. It's an art. It's a style." He was like, "I watched the tape. It's only human cockfighting to me." And I was like, people are not interested in jiu-jitsu. It was not a career choice at all. It blows my mind how far we've come. It blows my mind, guys. I was there from day one when it was an underground thing. When we went to TriStar was a kickboxing school, and we were starting a jiu-jitsu program there, and there was only like 5 or 8 people. It was just, we were the weirdos. Now the jiu-jitsu program is full to the brim. You can't fit a person on the mat. Now everybody knows MMA and jiu-jitsu and arm bars and stuff like that. Before, when guys were fighting on the ground, people didn't know what they were doing. Like in UFC, people had no idea. Now today, a guy does a very subtle move, people are cheering. They understand that he's progressed, that he's dominating. The awareness of what's going on the ground has exploded 1,000 times over. However, in the beginning, we were the weirdos dragging the fight to the ground. We're winning, but it's kind of cheating. It's kind of cheap the way we won. It was, those criticisms in every direction. And then, of course, jiu-jitsu got accepted, mainstream. I consider it to be mainstream. You watch a Hollywood movie now, it's not uncommon to see a jiu-jitsu move or something like that. People realize now that, the Steven Seagal days are gone. Now, if you do a Steven Seagal movie, you try to put it on the big screen, nobody's going to watch that. They're going to be like, "Oh, that's too much theater. It's way, it's almost sci-fi now. It's seen as sci-fi." People have been exposed to what real fighting is. So it's just incredible.
You mentioned TriStar, the famous gym up there. How did that transition go from training into becoming a coach?
I was doing the sport for fun. I was just obsessed with it because when I was younger, I was bullied. I had 2 older brothers. I'd go to school. I always felt insecure. People are gonna try to beat me up. People didn't like me or whatever. So anybody can just ref me out. I was a smaller guy. I grew taller much later in life, like at I would say 18. I finally got, I grew a couple of inches taller. But before that, I was smaller, so I was getting picked on a lot. So I really wanted to learn how to defend myself. So once I saw that martial arts is real, I dove in head first. So I was just doing it for fun. I was training David Loiseau along with Angelo Exarchos. He was a Canadian champion, world champion in the Canadian League. He fought fighters from the US. He defeated them. So then he got picked up by the UFC. He was the first Quebecois to go to UFC. That's when TriStar started becoming really, really popular. George St. Pierre, living in Quebec, came to train with us in TriStar. At the time, he was still not pro. We were training together. Me and him really got along. We clicked as people. We clicked as training partners. And he started training under the TriStar banner. We trained him for his first fight. And then after that, he got picked up by the UFC and became world champion. He fought Cairo Parisian. It was for 3 to show and 3 to win. So $6,000 total if everything goes right. And we trained for that fight for 3 months. So it for me, it wasn't a money-making project. You know, it was something I love to do. It was my sport, but I was planning on becoming a lawyer. I got a degree in philosophy. I wanted to take the bar later on. I want to become a lawyer. How are you going to live? You know, how are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to buy a home? How are you going to set yourself up for life? At that time, it wasn't martial arts because my best buds that were doing martial arts were losing money, and they were really good. We're talking about guys who they dominated the Canadian circuit. They went internationally. They're winning internationally, and they're still not earning a living. Like, they still have to have jobs. You know, if you make $6,000 3 times in a year, you're not living well. You know, so these guys are working. I could see that they're struggling. Tito Ortiz became famous. This is the time where Tito Ortiz became champion. He really paved the way for mainstream media because everybody was interested in Tito Ortiz. Tito Ortiz is one of the first original mainstream stars. He was intriguing to the US fans, especially. He was incredibly popular in America. I was there when he fought. I mean, people would just cheer. Like, Tito Ortiz was incredibly loved by the fans. The sport grew. All eyes were on Tito Ortiz. And then, of course, Tito Ortiz, he lost his title to Chuck Liddell. George St. Pierre was defeating Matt Hughes. Matt Hughes was a very popular name. Then George's name started becoming massive. At one point, he was the most recognized MMA fighter in the world. In the US, it was Brock Lesnar. Second was George St. Pierre, but worldwide was George St. Pierre. The sport exploded overnight. Like, the market exploded. So, of course, now George is making millions of dollars fighting. He went from literally 3+3 to, I don't want to say, but we're talking about tens of millions in his career, total career. He's made millions and millions. So, I mean, the sport grew so fast right before our eyes. It's just, my head is still spinning from the growth. Honestly, it's just like everybody knows UFC now. It's not
Right.
something. My grandmother will know what UFC. She might not watch it, but she's heard of it. It's mainstream. It's in my opinion still the fastest growing sport, but it's also already mainstream. It's not going anywhere. It's going to go even further. In my opinion, it's going to become like the NBA, NHL. Guys are going to sign their first pro fights. They're going to be signing multi-million-dollar contracts. They had an extensive amateur career in MMA. Then, of course, they're going to move. It's going to be exactly, in my opinion, like boxing is, like NFL is, like, and it should be like the NBA. It's going to be very similar.
It's almost there already, don't you think?
In terms of notoriety, yes, but not in terms of payday. It's nowhere near. You know, how many guys get, how much do you get paid for hitting a baseball these days?
That's right.
You hit a couple of baseballs, you're making $21 million. You know, it's like, we're not there yet.
Yeah. Did you hear about that baseballer who just signed for like a 700? The guy from Japan. I'm not.
Yes, I heard about that. How's that possible? How is that possible?
You tell me.
How is that possible? How good is this guy?
I mean, clearly he's one of the best. If they're paying him that much, he's widely recognized as one of the ones. But nobody in MMA is making that kind of.
No, nowhere near. Nowhere near.
Maybe one day. George had a phenomenal run. He's made tens of millions, as you mentioned, but he had 9 title defenses, which is incredible stuff, man. From your perspective, what set George apart from everybody else that you've coached and that you've seen across from you?
George is really the pinnacle of fitness and technique. Like, he really crossed the two. You know, some guys are very technical, some guys are very fit, but George really married the two very, very well. He was very, very serious about his fitness. He was very, very serious about drilling technique. He was very technique oriented. But he also knew the importance of fitness. Now, he started at a very young age. His father was a black belt. George started doing karate at a very young age, at a very serious level. He also loved track and field. He did a lot of fitness throughout his youth. He developed his athleticism incredibly well. So in his adulthood, he didn't have to worry too much about athleticism, even though he did keep, till this day, he still takes care of his physique at a professional level. And he was just obsessed with fine tuning his maneuvers. Like if it was his striking, his wrestling, his jujitsu, he was incredibly motivated to drill and study the sport and be a student of the game. And I feel like he did that to the highest level starting at a very young age until this day. Now he's in his 40s and he's still very adamant about taking care of his conditioning and technique.
He's still in great shape. UFC 300's around the corner. Any potential there?
You know what? I would never say, like, it's a question for George, but I would never count him out because he loves competing. Like,
Mhm.
he doesn't like fighting, but he loves to compete. He's a very sweet person. He's a very friendly guy. He's the last guy to want to hurt somebody. He's a gentle soul. However, he loves to compete, and it wouldn't surprise me if he called me up tomorrow and it's like, I'm gonna win. Let's do this. It wouldn't surprise me because he's such a competitor. But I don't think he's planning on it, to be
Mhm.
honest. I don't think he's planning on it at all. But George is a crazy guy. He's a crazy guy. If tomorrow he just wakes up and just feels like it, I wouldn't surprise me at all.
Now that coach athlete dynamic is so important, right? And I think you and George did it better than anybody else. And in these days, Sugar Sean O'Malley and Tim Welch, they have a fascinating relationship. What are some qualities and characteristics that go into a successful partnership?
I think we saw eye to eye, because at that time when me and George were younger, the kickboxing coach wanted us to kickbox, the wrestling coach wanted us to wrestle, of course, and you can't blame them. But me and George were really kind of putting all the game together. So we had special days where we train with striking and takedowns, and we do drills on the ground on the same day. So we do kickboxing with wrestling, and then after that we take off the gloves and we grapple on the ground. Those are practices that the MMA coach had to be at, and it was just kind of like working with experts in different fields and then kind of putting it together because of course our coaches would contradict each other sometimes because they have different ways of going about it. So we have, one kickboxing coach and a Muay Thai coach telling us two different things. So there was a lot of experimenting in the practice room. We had to try different methods. And we talk about it. We go to eat after. We're like, what do you think about this? Did you feel comfortable doing that? We were just kind of students of the game, putting it together, and we were experimenting a lot with how to manage training for an MMA fight. Like, how much fitness should you do, how much grappling, how much top game, how much bottom game, like how much fence wrestling. There's so much to manage, and we were experimenting with different formulas, discussing it every day. And we're always asking ourselves, what's the most important thing to do? You can't do everything. you know you got to do head movement, you got to do counter punching, you got to do counter kicking, you got to do front headlock. There's just so much to cover. We're fighting this guy. What's the most important thing for this fight? And that kind of like, me and him would have these deep discussions because if you ask a kickboxer, he'd be like, well, you got to kickbox. If you ask a wrestler, he's going to be like, well, you got to wrestle, right? So we really put our MMA hats on often, and we really got into deep discussions on how to strategize, how to get ready for this particular individual.
Now, past year in 2023, we had a fascinating crossover with Francis Ngannou tapping into boxing. What did you
Mm.
think of that?
Honestly, Fury, he's not always in the best shape. Okay, like when you look at him visually, he doesn't look like in the best shape. In my opinion, he looked in worse shape than. I'm not saying he's. I know he's not naturally ripped. Okay, I'm not trying to knock him for being ripped. You could be a world champion and not be ripped. It's genetic. There's a genetic factor there. Okay, fine. He looked like worse shape than usual. His footwork was nice, but everything else was, in my opinion, sloppy. His shot selection, his counters, he was getting countered by Ngannou. Like, he has so many more hours than Ngannou in boxing. He should have danced around Ngannou and pieced up Ngannou. I thought Ngannou won. I thought Ngannou hurt him. I thought Ngannou had him uh, double thinking, hesitating because Fury's jab wasn't working the way it should be. He was getting countered. Fury shouldn't be getting countered by Ngannou. And Ngannou's fighting 12 rounds. Like, he's used to fighting 25-minute rounds, not 36 minutes of action. We were in Tyson Fury's world, and Tyson Fury couldn't handle his business. It goes to show that we're not in a golden era of boxing. That's for sure. The
Mm.
Ali era was the golden age of heavyweight boxing, and if this doesn't convince you, you don't know anything about boxing. Everybody knows the golden era was Muhammad Ali. Mike Tyson had a great run, but he didn't have any counterparts to fight until he got much older. Like Lennox Lewis, he didn't fight Lennox Lewis till he went in jail, came out. He was no longer in his prime. Holyfield, he fought him after his prime. Like none of these guys were fighting him in his prime. We can't say that Tyson was in a golden era, and we definitely even lower. The tier is much lower now. Tyson is in no way one of the greats of all time. No way. And Ngannou is a monster. I'm not knocking him at all. He outboxed Fury. I salute him for going out of his sport into boxing and beating the world champion in boxing. I hold Ngannou in the highest regard. He's the best heavyweight in the world, both in boxing and MMA. That's my opinion.
Would you advise Francis to stay in boxing and take the AJ fight,
Sure.
or come back to MMA?
Sure. AJ fight would be very interesting. That's going to be. Look, I think Tyson underestimated Ngannou. I think he probably didn't train much. He wasn't motivated. He thought it was going to be a cakewalk, and he got surprised. Let me tell you something. MMA athletes are the best athletes in the world. It's what they do in training is shocking. Like, it's very difficult to train for an MMA fight. Very difficult. You have to grapple. You have to wrestle. You have to strike. You have to clinch. And you have to be in incredible physical conditioning. And also, on top of it, there's more. You got to avoid injury like the plague, because it's a very dangerous sport. It is the most difficult sport in the world. Boxing is a great sport, but there's a lot less to worry about. It's a lot easier on the body, it's a lot easier to prepare for. There's not as many things your opponent can do to you. There's not many ways to be surprised. Just learning leg lock defense can be very intimidating for an athlete. It's just so complicated. Learning choke defenses, learning fence wrestling. There's so many ways to die in MMA. And then you have the guy who only has to worry about the left and right hand. That's it. That's all he's got to worry about. And he can handle Ngannou. That just goes to show how great Ngannou is. He went out of his world to beat the best boxer in the world. I salute him. I hold him to be the greatest heavyweight fighter in the world, both boxing and MMA.
No argument here. No argument here. Now, let me ask you this. If I'm Israel Adesanya and I call up Coach Zahabi and I'm like, Firas, what should I do next?
Look, I love Adesanya. I'm a massive fan of him. I think he's a technical genius. The guy's a brilliant guy. We all have opinions. I think he backed up way too much. He backpedaled. He used the style that wasn't appropriate for that fight. Yes, he threw head kick. Look, when a guy's fighting like this, okay, when the guy's fighting in a Philly shell, there are weaknesses to the Philly shell. He threw head kicks, but he didn't back up. He didn't. When you stand like this, like Philly shell, it's very hard to defend kicks to the leg. It's hard to defend elbows, and it's hard to defend head kicks after punches. So if Adesanya threw punches and Strickland was defending in this manner by bobbing and weaving and slipping, he can get head kick. The problem was the setup on the head kicks weren't, in my opinion, the best. Okay, he didn't kick the leg enough. He didn't knee and elbow. He didn't tie him up in a clinch and Muay Thai elbow. Because once you're like this and I clinch you, if you're in this position, I grab your neck, now you're in trouble, man, because your arm's in the wrong position to defend against the clinch. There are weaknesses to the Philly shell. He didn't attack them. And he backed up way too much. Backing up too much against somebody in the Philly shell, it's a recipe for disaster. Strickland won that fight with a jab and a cross and a little bit of hook, but it was really the most simple punches: jab, 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 cross. And he clipped him in round one, and it just started a downward spiral for Adesanya. I think Adesanya had to change tactic. After round one, he stayed the same tactics for the entire fight. And I feel that he didn't recognize the weaknesses of a Philly shell, and he didn't attack them.
So what do I do next, Coach? Do I stay at 85? Do I go back to 205, try to chase a Pereira rematch?
No, he's got to stay at 185. In my opinion, 205, they're too big. Look, I don't even know how Pereira made 185. I don't think Pereira ever makes 185. He beat Pereira once. That's it. You won the last fight. Stay at 185, dominate 185. You can. I really believe he can come back to his title. Absolutely, he's gonna have to change his style a little bit to fight a Strickland. If I was training him to fight Strickland, I would have made him fight with a long guard against that Philly shell, a long guard, because a long guard is really the antagonist to the Philly shell. But Adesanya was kind of fighting hands down a little bit. He was switching stances and running around the fence. No, that's what the Philly shell is good for. A Philly shell is really good against punching. That's why they stand like this. In Muay Thai, they stand like this a lot. Okay, because now we call it the long guard. It would smother the Philly shell, and it will allow him to kick knee elbow, and I think it could have been a very different story.
On the topic of the middleweights, Duplessis challenged in Strickland in January. What's your thoughts on that matchup? And ultimately, who do you see taking it home?
That's a very honestly, I watched that. I watched Duplessis fight against Whitaker, Robert Whitaker, and I was stunned. Honestly, I really stunned. I thought Whitaker was gonna have that fight, to be honest with you. And I'm a big fan of Robert Whitaker. He knocked down Whitaker with a jab. Now Whitaker has an incredible chin. I know he's been knocked out by Adesanya. Adesanya's got a left hook from hell. Like he's got a killer left hook. He can flatten anybody with that left hook. But Robert is known for his chin. He's got a very, very good chin and a very, very good punching, explosive power. He's got a very, Robert's known for that. And Duplessis was able to hurt him with a jab. Now, the jab is the most important punch in boxing, but it's the least powerful. Like, I don't know if you ever hit one of those power cubes. The hook and the cross are far more powerful than the jab, far more. Even though the jab is the most important punch, it generally doesn't knock people down. Duplessis was able to knock down Whitaker with a jab, which I found to be very shocking. So I really have a hard time figuring out what's going to happen between Strickland and Duplessis. I'm a big believer in Strickland's ability. Don't get me wrong; he's a phenomenal fighter. But Duplessis, he's a freak. Like he's got a weird style that he does headlock throws. I mean, he got Whitaker down with a headlock throw, and generally headlocks don't work in MMA. Usually it's slippery. The guys get to your back. No, Duplessis found a way to make it work. Generally, people don't get knocked down with a jab. Duplessis knocks people down with a jab. And it's no fluke. He's hitting guys who are ex-world champion and with a solid chin, and he was able to do it. Duplessis is an incredible athlete. He's going to have that edge. He's tough as nails. I think Strickland's a better striker, but still, Duplessis does some crazy stuff in there. It's very difficult to call. And I'm going to be very interested to see what happens.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard one to call and
Very
pick a winner.
difficult.
Another athlete who I'm curious what they do in 2024, and I'm curious your take is Kamaru Usman. What do you think he does next?
I thought he really did well to fight Khamzat. Like he went up a weight class and he fought Khamzat. I think Khamzat's naturally a bigger guy. He had a rough round 1, but he rallied back in round 2. He rallied back in round 3. I think Khamzat won, but Usman showed he has layers, and he's still able to, he's still able to touch gold. Like I really feel if he fights at 170 and he goes for another run and he corrects his certain issues, he could be world champion again. It's definitely within the realm of possibility. Very definitely so. It all depends. Does he have the drive to stay in the gym and go for it again? It's really up to him. But I was impressed. Even though he lost, he did very much impress me still against Khamzat.
And in that welterweight class, Bilal hopefully is next for that fight against Leon. Is that your pick for Leon next?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Bilal paid his dues. He's won he's put a string of impressive wins. It's his time. If they pass him now, it would be really unfair, I think, because yes, I know there are other rising stars, but he's paid his dues. He's won fight after fight. He's put on incredible performances. He has paid his dues. Like it's Bilal's turn now. If they don't give him his turn, he might never get his turn. It's fair. He earned it. And I think he can do it. It's going to be a tough fight between him and Leon. But it's a very interesting fight. Like I would hope they give it to him.
And Leon, after his last fight, talked about wanting to compete against GSP's record title defenses. What did you think of that comment?
That's a tall order, but if he can do it, man, he really impressed me. It's a tall order, though. That's a really tall order. But it's not. Leon's a brilliant guy. His last fight was incredible. He did a great job against Kobe Covington, and he's a great champion. But that's a tall order. Could be.
Now tell me about Tim Tam.
Yeah, Tim Tam, guys. That's a company we set up years and years ago. It's high-powered massagers. I love it. I use it all the time for recovery. Whenever I have a tight muscle, I take out the Tim Tam. I don't go to physiotherapists. I'll be honest with you guys. I haven't gone to a physiotherapist in a long, long time. I had one session in the last, I would say 7-8 years. Once I hurt my neck really badly. George was begging me to go see his physio. I went to see him. I had one treatment, just to make him happy. But I'm a big believer in taking care of my own body. Like I know the basics of taking care of my body, and I think if you do the basics really well of taking care of your body, you can keep your body healthy. And one of them is keeping your muscles loose. Whenever you train, if you feel like you have a tight muscle somewhere, you can use a foam roller, you can use a lacrosse ball, but that takes time and energy. It's inefficient. It takes a long time to do it. You got to seesaw up and down on this thing. Instead of doing it that way, grab a Tim Tam, a high powered massager. You shoot that muscle, you massage it, massage all around. So if your shoulder's tight, you work your pecs, you work your traps, you work your bicep, you work your all the muscles around. So if my shoulder's tight, I'm working my bicep, my tricep, my traps. I'm working all the muscles in that area. You're gonna feel that shoulder's gonna ease up. The pain is gonna ease up. Why? Because whenever your muscles are tight, they're pulling on that joint. And that's usually the pain, the reason for pain. Okay, between your muscles, the way Kelly Starrett explains it, a PhD in physio, he says, look, between your muscles and your skin, there's fascia, and that fascia gets really, really tight. So to get it to slide again, you got to massage it instead of using foam roller. Like I said, we use the high powered massager. It's just like it's just foam rolling on steroids. That's the number one thing. Kelly Starrett says number one is keep your muscles loose. Number two is alignment. Okay, so if you pick up a book called The Supple Leopard, Becoming a Supple Leopard by Kelly Starrett. He's a brilliant physiotherapist. He's a PhD. He talks how to keep your neck neutral, your back neutral, your shoulders neutral. And just the basics he shows in that book. And of course, he teaches you how to keep your muscles loose. So he says, look, it comes down to two major things. One is alignment. Two is keeping your muscles loose. Alignment is something you learn. It's not complicated. You learn how to align your body. And then two, you have to work your muscles. So me personally, if I train and one of my muscles is tight, I take out the Tim Tam, I massage it, I make sure that muscle is loosened up before the next practice. I don't allow for any tight muscles. Keeping those two simple rules, I've been and I'm a guy who does martial arts every day. I roll once or twice a day. Like I do tons of training, and I'm 44 very shortly. I'm training 20 years, and I'm super, super healthy, injury free. And I'm a big believer in those two rules. Now, I also do a lot of stability training. For those of you out there who know me, I have a series called Strong and Stable. I really believe in stability training, keeps your joints healthy. Mixed martial art is, in my opinion, the most dangerous sport in the world. So if you want to live to tell about it, don't get injured. I would say the three rules is, like Kelly Starrett, the first two is stay aligned, keep those muscles loose. But number three for me, do a lot of stability work. If you do a lot of stability work, you will stay injury free, because MMA, wrestling, jiu-jitsu is just such a tough sport on the joints. So Tim Tam is a very important element of keeping your body healthy and recovery.
Now, when you started Tim Tam, was it because you noticed a deficiency in the game and that we needed, and as you described, a foam roller on
Well,
steroids?
I had a horrible sciatica. If you guys don't know what sciatica is, it's like a shooting pain down your leg. It starts kind of like in your back, lower back, and it shoots down your leg, and it's agony. I'm telling you, it's agony. I almost stopped training. Like I almost quit jiu-jitsu. I was having pains for about a year. Nobody could fix me. Okay, like I went to different physios, and I would feel better, then the pain would come back. And then one day I was at a fight with George St. Pierre, and one of his physios was there, and he had this thing called the DMS, Deep Muscle Stimulator, and he massaged my leg with it, and my pain the next day was really, really good. But I noticed that he told me, yeah, you got to keep working it. Like it's not going to go away with one session. You got tight muscles. You got to loosen them up on a daily basis. So I was like, okay, I got to buy one of these things. It cost me about 3,000 Canadian dollars. Okay. The price was like 2,700 plus American. Very expensive. I bought the thing. It would overheat after 30 minutes. I had to plug it in. It was super heavy. People were asking to borrow it all the time. All the athletes in my gym wanted to borrow it. It was a $3,000 device. I had to keep track of who had it. I lended somebody, he lended someone else. And all of a sudden I was stressing out because it was $3,000. And I'm not even able to use it because some guy has a fight and he wants to borrow it. And everybody wanted this thing, and I couldn't buy 10 of them, right? It would cost me too much. So I talked to my management, and I was like, you know what? I want to develop a cordless version that doesn't overheat, that I could switch out the batteries, because being cordless, I had to let it cool off every 30, 40 minutes because it would overheat. Now, the technology was old. So I got together with Tim Tam. Thomas Pepe was hired by one of my management, we were connected by one of my managers, and they made a prototype. We refined it, and all. We have the world's most powerful and most quiet, high-powered massager, high-quality massager. It won't overheat. You could switch batteries. You can have 5 batteries charged. Like, you can use it, on a whole football team. Actually, it was amazing to watch one of the Super Bowls. The Patriots were using it. We saw it in the background that the Patriots had Tim Tams in the background.
Mm.
They were using it on the football players. You can put 10,000 hours on that thing; it ain't gonna break. It's super super resilient, super super strong. I use them all the time, and it's an athlete's best friend. I don't care what sport you play. Now, interesting thing is, when I started to promote them, I would just show somebody the Tim Tam, and right away they wanted to buy it. I had no Tim Tams like in stock ever, ever, ever. Like, if I had 10 of them, they were gone like right away. So the sales just started to skyrocket. Joe Rogan loves it. He showed it on his channel. The rest was history. Now it's one of the most popular machines there is in all of fitness: soccer, football, baseball, swimming, track and field. I mean, everybody loves this device.
I mean, because if it's one thing that all athletes have in common, it's a pinched nerve, it's a tight
Oh,
muscle. Everybody
yeah.
goes through that. And you could find it on timtamperformance.com, right? You can
That's
find
right. That's right.
instructionals. And I also noticed that you guys are selling powders and like protein stuff like that.
Yeah, we have a nutrition brand as well. So people, they subscribe on a monthly basis. That way they keep their nutrition on point.
Nice.
Nutrition is also super important for recovery. You need all those things. You need proper sleep, training with a margin of safety. Don't overtrain, like train consistently. You need to keep your body aligned. You need to keep your muscles loose. Then you're going to have a sense of energy. You eat right, you sleep right, you train right. You can have a sense of well being. That's what I always tell people. The greatest drug is fine tuning your diet and exercise. And your fitness includes your recovery. Diet and exercise, when you have those two fine tuned perfectly, you don't need any other stimulant. Me, I drink a coffee in the morning because it's pleasant, but I don't need a coffee. When I wake up in the morning, I have full energy. I train. I train every day. I feel super, super healthy. It's all about taking care of your health and fitness. I don't go to the doctor. Like, I go to the doctor very, very rarely. I have very, very little issues with my body. And I think that 95% of health is diet and exercise.
On that topic, how important is incorporating sleep in recovery?
Sleep is huge, man. You cannot bypass sleep. I don't care how tough you are. If you missed an hour of sleep, the next day you need to make up for it. I'm a big believer in sleeping. I believe you should sleep 8 hours a day minimum. And if you don't, the next day you got to try to make it up, take a nap. I'm a big believer in taking 20-minute naps as well. If I don't feel fresh, I'm setting myself up for a nap, because you're not efficient. You're not at your most creative. You're not at your most brilliant when you're not well rested. At the end of the day, people think, "Oh, I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to push through the night." Well, guess what? You're going to do the worst work. If you try to write your essay through the night, pushing through fatigue, guess what? You're going to write the work. It's not going to be your best essay. It's not going to be your best work. You need to make appropriate time for your activities. You got to put the most important things on top of the list. You know, you got to be a well-organized person, and a well-organized person makes time for rest. Stephen R. Covey says it beautifully. He says, he wrote the 7 habits. The last habit is sharpening the saw. Meaning, he tells a story about, if he was about to cut down this massive tree, he would spend the first few hours sharpening his saw. Because if you're trying to saw a massive tree with a dull blade, it takes twice as long. You might as well take an hour, sharpen that saw, and do the job in half the time. So it's all about keeping your senses sharp, your creativity sharp. And to do that, you have to respect that the body has needs for recovery. The formula is stress plus recovery equals adaptation. It's not stress plus stress plus stress plus stress. Like, some people wake up in the morning, they train, then they go to school, then they train at night, and at night they study, they write their essays. I have students that, burn the candle at both ends. The next day they come into practice and they're zombies. They're not going to be healthy. They're going to get injured. They won't progress. More work is not always better. It's stress plus recovery. So training is a stress. Whatever stress you gave it, now you have to give it adequate recovery. And then you're going to have this sense of, I got better, I'm faster, I'm more explosive. You're motivated to train again. Recovery is a massive part of breaking through plateaus.
Now, Tim Tam Performance has a new product coming out. What can you tell us about it?
Well, we have this brand new device. Actually, it's a power trainer. It's a submission power trainer, Kimura power trainer.
Mm.
It's basically a device where you can. It's sports specific. Okay, so what does sports specific mean? Because in exercise science, we have a principle called the SAID principle: specific adaptation to imposed demand. If I were to make you do bench press, your bench press is going to obviously increase, right? Let's say you're able to bench press 150. I make you bench press for 3-4 weeks. Now you're bench pressing 170. Okay, you're a noob. Beginners have more gains early on. You break through plateaus very quickly the more beginner you are. The more experienced of an athlete you are, the harder it is to add 5 or 10 pounds on the bar. The harder and harder it is, right? Because you've exploited your potential. Now, if I take that athlete, okay, I've increased his bench press, and now I want to increase his, I don't know, his 400-meter run. The same thing's going to happen. I'm going to have a lot of gains early on. But you'll notice that the more I train him in 400-meter running, the lower his bench press is. Those two are very opposite skills. The better he gets at 400-meter, he didn't get any better at bench pressing. Okay, so your body will adapt specifically to what you make it do. If you're practicing pull-ups every day, guess what? You're going to get better at pull-ups. You're not going to get better at running. If you practice swimming every day, guess what? You're going to get much better at swimming. You're not going to get better at running. Your running times are not going to improve. Okay, so your body specifically adapts to the imposed demand. So I developed a prototype of, I call it the Kimura Power Trainer, Submission Power Trainer, where you can work your Kimura grips against weight and specifically using jiu-jitsu/MMA maneuvers, specifically. So think about it as a bench press for submissions. You could also use it to hold onto a guillotine. So imagine if I was doing guillotine with weights every day, working my grips specifically, my guillotine muscles against live weights every day. That's what I've been doing now. My guillotines, I don't have to tell you, have skyrocketed. Every time I grab a guy's neck now, I choke him out. Why? My guillotine strength has increased. And I've just been working on it in a short time because it's new. It's a new stimulus to the body and it's specific to the sport. You make incredible gains early on. So I've been working with this device a very short period. I've seen my grip increase. I'm using a lot of bands, elastic, because you could use it with elastic bands or free weights. And it's a brilliant device. I think the whole MMA world and jiu-jitsu world is going to adopt it very quickly. Because if they don't, I mean, they're going to fall behind, because this device is a specific way to increase your grip for guillotine and kimura and armbar. And it's specific to the sport. So it's kind of like doing bench press for a bench press competition. I'm doing kimuras for jiu-jitsu. I'm doing guillotines for jiu-jitsu. It's extremely specific, and we want to develop a whole line of specific products that are going to be coming to the market slowly. The first one is the Kimura Power Trainer. It's for kimura grip, armbar grip, and guillotine grip. It's a brilliant device. I've been working with it, and I think from here to next year, I'm going to have increased my squeeze to a ridiculous amount.
Where and when can they find this product?
We have to put 10,000 miles on it first.
Fair.
It's going to come out soon. I think in the next few months it should come out, but we're still testing it. We're having it every day in the gym. I want to make sure this thing is like perfect. I'm learning still new ways to use it. Modifications are being made, but this product is it's like no other. In my opinion, it's like no other. It's a shortcut to developing a powerful squeeze. And imagine being the only guy with a bench press. Everybody else is trying to develop their strength with push-ups and dumbbells. You'll never develop a 500-pound bench press using rings, push-ups, plyometrics, or dumbbells. You'll never develop a 500-pound bench press. I've never heard of it. I've never seen one major. And I'm using bench press. I could use any other exercise. I can use squat. Okay, you're not gonna be able to squat 500 pounds by doing body weight squats, by doing plyometrics. You'll never develop that level of lifting. You have to have a squat rack. It's a similar in terms of guillotine squeeze. You'll never develop a guillotine squeeze like we're going to develop. And again, this is year one. So give me a year to develop monsters with incredible guillotine squeezes. We're basically doing what people did with the bench press, with the squat rack. We're doing it with the guillotine choke, the second statistically most successful choke in all of grappling and MMA. It's statistically the second most popular. Now, with this device, you could also increase your rear naked choke, which is statistically the number one. So this device does a lot of different submissions. Okay, so it's a very simple device. When people see it, they're gonna be like, I wish I thought of that. I'm the first guy to think about it. I spent countless hours in the gym. I'm like, you know what? If I had this certain tool, it would make life easier. Let me call my boy Tom Pepe, the man who makes things happen from Disrupt. He's got the ways to do it. I don't know how he does it, but he knows how to put things together, make things happen. And lo and behold, he created an awesome device. He made it happen. And now we're bringing this product to market. you never know how people are gonna react. But I'm definitely a user. I'm definitely a believer. And if people don't adopt it, well, guess what? I think they're gonna get guillotined, kimura, and armbarred by the guys I train. It's coming.
Mm. So look for that, and along with all the other products you mentioned over at timtamperformance.com. I'll have it linked below, and along with all your other links you can find for us across all platforms. This was a pleasure for us. I really appreciate the time. I've looked up to you for years as a
Thank you,
Middle
man.
Eastern boy, so it's awesome to have this chat.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and last thing, you've been a part of so many big moments. Can we get some posters behind you? Can we get some art?
You're right. I gotta decorate this thing. You see, my mind is. You're right. I've been meaning to do it for so long, but I just keep forgetting, man. Honestly, I'm just such a busy guy. I wake up in the morning and it's go 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 till I get home at night, and I got the family, wife, and kids. Gotta make time for that. But you're 100% right, man. I've been meaning to put like a neon sign back here. I don't know. I mean, make me a suggestion, and maybe I put some art back there.
For sure, that'd
I
be
gotta figure it
awesome.
out.
There's a really cool picture with you, like, hanging over with George's whole corner and George in front, he's looking down
Yeah,
across
yeah,
the stage.
yeah.
That's
Me,
a awesome
Jackson.
pi yeah,
Yeah, maybe I'll put that back there. That's a good idea. I'll
that
figure
one
it out. I'll find something nice.
that would be sick. Well, I'll let you get to it, man.
Thank
Have
you,
a
brother.
blessed rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, brother. See you soon.